Honourable Member, Clea Curran.
Talofa lafa, Mr Speaker.
Amoioi, Ms Curran.
Mr Speaker, Labour stands for opportunity for all New Zealanders. It stands for everybody having a decent job with a decent wage, with a house to live in that they can afford, and where their children can grow up and have opportunities and not live in poverty, unlike the 285,000 New Zealand children who are currently living in poverty. Sadly, this is the country that we are living in at the moment, and this is the country within which this legislation is badly needed, even though it remains flawed. Last night, Mr Speaker, in Dunedin, the co-authors of The Spirit Level, Professors Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett, spoke at a lecture in Dunedin at the university about how health and social ills are linked to economic inequality. They spoke about how it's not rocket science, but that how more equal countries consistently fare better in life expectancy, imprisonment, infant mortality, addictions, social mobility, obesity, literacy, and other measures. And as it would be expected, their research shows that New Zealand has high levels of both economic inequality and social problems. Sadly, Mr Speaker, I couldn't be at that lecture last night. Why is that? Because I was meeting with a group which is trying to become the voice for one of the poorest and most unequal parts of our country, which is South Dunedin. Just on the other side of town from where this lecture was being given is one of the most poor parts of our country. And if you don't believe me, Mr Speaker, but I'm sure you do believe me, the most recent New Zealand Deprivation Index was released just recently, which clearly showed that the area of South Dunedin is one of the poorest parts of our country. It's one of the areas which has highest density and lowest income. And certainly it's not the only area like that, but it's the area within which I live, where my office is situated, and it's literally minutes away from where I actually live. And it's the area it's an area which has growing numbers of lenders, third-tier lenders, popping up, and it's also an area where we have more debt management services also emerging in that community. And the reason that we have this bill before the House today, 11 years, Mr Speaker, 11 years since a review was first done as to what was needed to be the next steps around credit management in this country. It's taken 11 years to get to this point where we've got a piece of legislation coming before the House, which almost all of the House supports. We know that it's flawed, but we also know that we need it. And it's taken 11 years for that to get before this House. Last week, Mr Speaker, I attended the announcement of a new debt management service in the South Dunedin area. It's called the Christians Against Poverty, and it's a service which is clearly a Christian-related service, and it's offering a whole range of management services that are already currently being provided in the city. But the fact that there is a new service popping up in one of the poorest parts of the city indicates that the depth of the issues related to poverty And we heard stories at this announcement last week of the people who hide at night when there's a knock at the door or when the telephone rings, because it'll either be someone trying to sell them something, or it'll be one of the debt management people, the people that are coming around to collect the money or take away their possessions, coming to the door. This is an absolutely unacceptable situation in my city of Dunedin. It's an unacceptable situation in New Zealand, and we have to address it. This bill goes some of the way towards addressing that issue, and it doesn't address the whole issue, but it goes some of the way towards doing it. And it goes some of the way because it introduces a responsible lending code, which is an instrument which sets out a detailed guidance for lenders to comply with responsible lending principles. This is actually a very important part of this bill. It's part of this bill that we really do support, and there was a lot of work put into it, and I'm sure we've heard a lot about that tonight. It also recognises that unforeseen hardship, which means that borrowers can apply to a creditor to change their loan term or reduce or postpone payments on the grounds of unforeseen hardship. That's also a really important part of the bill. Again, it doesn't go far enough, but it is an important part. I'd also like to acknowledge tonight, after concerns in the Select Committee raised by my colleague Clayton Cosgrove, the Select Committee agreed to a provision of a requirement that credit card statements should include a prescribed warning about minimum repayments. That's also, it seems like a simple thing, but it actually is really quite important, and that was due to the hard work being done on this side of the House to make provisions that are actually going to be more effective. Labor also raised the concerns about those truck shop lenders at Select Committee, and as a result the definition of business premises was expanded under Section 9 of this bill to include, quote, a vehicle stand or a stall from which goods are offered or exposed for sale, or from which goods may be ordered if those goods are sold under a credit sale. Those measures are really important, but as we've heard tonight, the big gap in this bill is the failure to include interest rate caps for third-tier lenders. If we were able to include that in this bill, we would have made a huge difference in this country tonight to those communities throughout New Zealand that are really struggling and where there is extreme poverty. Unfortunately, we couldn't go that far because on that side of the House, on the government side of the House, for whatever ideological reason or reason which was captured by some group, we couldn't actually manage it. I've said in this House before, previously speaking on this bill, that I predict we will be back in this House within 2 years, and we will be making changes to include interest rate caps. And I stand here tonight giving that commitment because I know that we will do whatever we can to get this bill changed to include a provision which has interest rate caps on it, just as so many other countries have in the world. We must have that provision in order for this bill to be truly effective. Tonight I want to acknowledge the work done by Carol Beaumont, my colleague on this bill. Without her hard work, we wouldn't have the bill in the state that it is here tonight. I know that the officials worked very hard. I'm very pleased to commend this bill to the House.
I call the Honourable Chris Tremaine.